Commander Velthar stepped off the transport ship and looked at the human training facility with barely hidden disappointment. He had fought in 43 campaigns across the galaxy. He had seen wars that lasted decades and battles that consumed entire planets. His species, the Kethrani, were known throughout the Confederation as the greatest warriors to ever exist. They had conquered 17 star systems and never lost a war. Now he was here to evaluate these humans who wanted to join the Confederation. The facility was clean and organized. He had to admit that much. Rows of simple buildings stretched across the valley. Humans in their military uniforms moved between the structures with purpose, but they looked so small, so fragile. Velthar stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and scales that could deflect small arms fire. These humans were barely 6 feet, with only 2 arms and soft skin. A human officer approached him. She was a woman with sharp eyes and short black hair. She saluted in the human way, one hand to her forehead. "Commander Velthar, welcome to Training Base Harmony. I'm Captain Hana. I'll be your liaison during your evaluation." Velthar returned the gesture awkwardly. The human salute seemed pointless when you had 4 arms. "Captain, I'm here to assess your species' military capabilities. The Confederation needs to know if humans can hold their own in combat." "Of course, Commander. We're ready to show you what we can do." Over the next 3 days, Velthar watched the humans train. They ran obstacle courses, practiced with their weapons, and conducted training exercises. They were competent, he supposed. Their aim was decent. Their tactics were acceptable. They followed orders well enough, but they were nothing special. He watched them struggle with tasks that would be simple for a Kethrani warrior. They couldn't lift the heavy weapons his people carried easily. They moved slower than most species he had trained with. When they sparred with each other, their strikes lacked the devastating power he was used to seeing. On the 4th day, Velthar demonstrated Kethrani combat techniques. A crowd of human soldiers gathered to watch. He faced 3 of their best fighters at once in a training ring. The rules were simple. Non-lethal strikes only. Fight until someone surrendered. The match lasted 47 seconds. Velthar moved like liquid metal, his 4 arms striking from multiple angles at once. The humans couldn't track all his limbs. They tried to coordinate their attacks, but he was too fast. One went down from a sweep to the legs. Another took a strike to the chest that knocked the wind from his lungs. The third lasted 5 seconds longer before a controlled blow to the shoulder dropped him. The human soldiers clapped politely. Velthar tried not to feel superior, but it was difficult. This was the difference between a warrior species and everyone else. After the demonstration, a young human officer approached him. He was tall for his species, with broad shoulders and a respectful expression. "Commander Velthar, I'm Lieutenant Daejung. That was impressive, sir. I was wondering if you might teach some of us those techniques." Velthar looked down at the lieutenant. He seemed earnest enough. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your interest, but Kethrani combat styles are designed for our physiology. You have only 2 arms. Your bone structure cannot handle the torque involved in our strikes. Your reaction time, while adequate for a human, is too slow for our defensive methods." "I understand, sir, but maybe we could adapt them, learn the principles?" "Lieutenant," Velthar said, not unkindly, "you lack the physical tools for true warfare. Your species is simply not built for extended combat. There is no shame in this. Most species in the galaxy are not warriors." Daejung's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I see. Thank you for your time, Commander." That evening, Velthar sat in his temporary quarters and began writing his preliminary report. Captain Hana had provided him with detailed records of human military history. He scanned through them with mild interest. The humans had fought many wars on their home planet. That was not unusual. Most species had violent histories. But as he read deeper, something began to puzzle him. The wars were so long. One conflict had lasted 4 years. Another had stretched across 6 years. There were records of sieges that continued for months. How did they sustain that? The longest war in Kethrani history had lasted 8 months, and that was considered a grinding, exhausting campaign. He made a note to ask Captain Hana about this, but decided it wasn't important for his evaluation. Probably the humans just fought inefficiently. On the 5th day, Velthar observed a long-distance march. The human soldiers were required to travel 30 miles in full combat gear. He followed in a transport vehicle, monitoring their progress. They moved steadily, not fast, but constant. After 10 miles, he expected them to slow down significantly. They didn't. After 20 miles, he thought surely they would need extended rest. They took a 10-minute break and continued. At the 30-mile mark, the soldiers arrived tired but functional. Most could still engage in combat drills. Velthar found this moderately impressive. A Kethrani warrior could cover the distance faster. But these humans had more endurance than he expected. Still, endurance wasn't the same as combat ability. On the 6th day, Velthar requested a full combat simulation. The humans would assault a fortified position defended by combat drones programmed to match Kethrani response patterns. Captain Hana assembled a platoon of 40 soldiers. Lieutenant Daejung was among them. They studied the objective for 20 minutes, then moved out. Velthar watched from the command center. The humans approached carefully, using cover effectively. When the drones opened fire, they didn't panic. They returned fire, advanced, took casualties, and kept moving forward. The assault lasted 2 hours. By the end, the humans had taken the objective. 23 of the 40 soldiers were marked as casualties by the simulation system. In a real battle, they would be dead or severely wounded. Acceptable, Velthar muttered to himself. Captain Hana stood beside him, watching the screens. What did you think, Commander? Your soldiers are competent. They follow doctrine well. Their tactics are sound if somewhat cautious, but, Hana asked, but they lack the physical advantages necessary for modern warfare. In a real battle against a peer opponent, those casualty numbers would be much higher. The Kethrani would have taken that position in 40 minutes with less than 10% casualties. Different approaches, Hana said quietly. No, Captain. Different capabilities. That evening, Velthar finished his preliminary report. He wrote, "Human military forces are acceptable for garrison and support roles. They demonstrate adequate marksmanship, acceptable tactical thinking, and reasonable discipline. However, they lack the physical attributes necessary for frontline combat against peer adversaries. Recommendation: accept humans as Confederation members but limit military role to non-combat specialties." He sent the report to his superiors and prepared for his final day of evaluation. The next morning, Lieutenant Daejung approached him during breakfast. The young officer sat down across from him without asking permission. Velthar found this mildly disrespectful but said nothing. "Commander, I read that your species has never lost a war." "This is correct. How long was your longest war?" 8 months. "Against the Vrex Collective. They were formidable opponents." Daejung nodded slowly. 8 months. That is impressive. Something in the human's tone made Velthar look up. "You disagree?" "No, sir. I'm just thinking about scale. On Earth, we had a war that lasted 6 years. Millions died. The soldiers who fought at the end were completely different people than those who started. They had to be. Inefficiency, Velthar said. A war should be won quickly or not fought at all. Maybe, Daejung said. Or maybe we just learned something different. We learned how to keep fighting when everything says stop. Velthar studied the human. There was no challenge in his voice, just statement of fact. Your species will break in your first real battle, Lieutenant. I say this not to insult you, but to prepare you. Real war is not like your simulations. Daejung smiled slightly. Yes, sir. I'm sure you're right. But the look in his eyes suggested he didn't believe that at all. Velthar dismissed the thought. He had fought real wars. He knew what broke soldiers, what shattered units, what destroyed armies. These humans, for all their discipline and training, simply didn't have what it took to survive that crucible. He would finish his evaluation tomorrow and return to Confederation space. The humans would join as support members, and that would be the end of it. He had no way of knowing that in 72 hours, everything he believed about war would be proven wrong. The attack came without warning. Velthar was reviewing his final evaluation notes when the alarm screamed through Outpost Meridian. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The automated voice repeated the same message. Hostile contact. All personnel to combat stations. This is not a drill. He ran to the command center, his forearms already reaching for his weapons. Captain Hana was there, along with other human and Kethrani officers. The main screen showed the sensor readouts. Drakon, said the Kethrani sensor officer, his voice tight. 3 capital ships. Approximately 40,000 ground troops heading for the surface. Velthar felt his blood go cold. The Drakon were the nightmare of the galaxy. They were an insectoid species that operated as a hive mind. They felt no fear, took no prisoners, and never retreated. Worse, they reproduced quickly. Every battle against them was a war of attrition. How long until they make landfall? Velthar demanded. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare for hell. Velthar took command immediately. His rank gave him authority over all forces on the outpost. He turned to Captain Hana. Get your humans to the supply depot. I need them to protect our ammunition and medical supplies. My Kethrani warriors will hold the perimeter. Hana looked at him steadily. Commander, with respect, my soldiers can fight on the line. Your soldiers will be most useful in support roles. This is not a debate, Captain. We have minutes, not hours. Follow your orders. For a moment he thought she might argue. Then she saluted. Yes, sir. The Kethrani forces moved to the outer defensive walls. Velthar had 200 of his best warriors. They were the elite, veterans of multiple campaigns. They would hold until reinforcements arrived. Surely the Confederation fleet would respond quickly. The Drakon landed in waves. They came in drop pods that slammed into the ground like meteors. The doors burst open and the creatures poured out. They looked like massive ants, each one 6 feet long with mandibles that could cut through steel. Their armor was natural, grown from their own chitin. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands of individuals acting as one mind. The battle began. Velthar's warriors fought magnificently. Their weapons cut down Drakon by the dozens. Their forearms allowed them to fire 2 rifles simultaneously, while reloading 2 more. They were everything a warrior species should be. Strong, fast, and deadly. But the Drakon kept coming. For every one they killed, 2 more appeared. The creatures climbed over their own dead without hesitation. They swarmed the walls, their mandibles clicking, their legs scratching against stone. After 2 hours, Velthar's warriors began to tire. It was slight at first, just a little less precision in their shots. But it was there. After 4 hours, they were rotating positions to catch their breath. After 6 hours, Velthar made a decision he hated. He called Captain Hana. Captain, I need your forces on the north wall. My warriors need time to recover. On our way, Commander. Velthar expected the humans to buy them an hour, maybe 2 if they were lucky. Then his Kethrani warriors would be rested enough to take over again. It was a temporary measure. He watched through the command center cameras as the human soldiers took their positions. They looked so small compared to the Drakon. Where a Kethrani warrior could hold a section of wall alone, the humans needed 3 or 4 to cover the same space. The Drakon attacked the north wall immediately. They could sense weakness. The humans opened fire. Velthar watched Lieutenant Daejung coordinate his squad. The young officer moved calmly between positions, directing fire, calling out targets. When a Drakon climbed over the wall, Daejung shot it 3 times in rapid succession. The creature fell back. 1 hour passed. The humans held. 2 hours passed. They were still there. Velthar checked the readouts. Human casualties were mounting, but not catastrophically. They were using cover better than he expected. Conserving ammunition, supporting each other. When one soldier ran low on ammunition, another immediately shared their supply. After 4 hours, he expected them to call for relief. They didn't. After 6 hours, he expected them to break. They didn't. At the 8-hour mark, Velthar walked to the north wall himself. He needed to see this with his own eyes. The humans were exhausted. He could see it in their movements. They weren't as fast as they had been at the start. Their hands shook slightly when they reloaded. But they were still fighting. A young human medic ran past him. Her name tag read Minji. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old. She was carrying medical supplies toward a wounded soldier who was still firing his rifle with one arm, while the other hung uselessly at his side. Get down, Velthar shouted as a Drakon appeared on the wall above her. Minji dropped flat. The creature leaped at her. Velthar shot it mid-air. It crashed down beside her. She looked up at him, nodded once in thanks, and continued to her patient. She worked on the wounded soldier right there, under fire, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. When she finished, she moved to the next casualty. Velthar found Sergeant Taewon directing fire from a reinforced position. The human was older than most, probably in his 40s. His left arm was prosthetic, clearly a replacement from an earlier injury. Sergeant, your men need relief, Velthar said. Taewon glanced at him, then back at the battlefield. We're holding, Commander. For how much longer? As long as you need us to. It wasn't bravado. The sergeant said it the same way someone might comment on the weather. Just a simple fact. At the 10-hour mark, Velthar noticed something strange. The humans were singing. Not loudly, not constantly, but between firefights he could hear them. It was some kind of marching song in their language. It had a steady rhythm that matched the pulse of battle. The Drakon seemed confused by it. Their attacks became less coordinated. The hive mind couldn't understand creatures that made music while fighting. At hour 12, Velthar finally ordered the rotation. His Kethrani warriors were rested and ready. The humans pulled back to secondary positions. Velthar caught Lieutenant De Jung as he left the wall. The young officer's uniform was covered in dirt and ichor. He had a cut above his eyebrow that was still bleeding slightly. Lieutenant, that was unexpected. De Jung smiled tiredly. We held the line, sir. That's what matters. How are your men still standing? Because sitting down would mean dying, Commander. It's really that simple. Velthar watched the humans move to their rest area. They weren't celebrating. They weren't even talking much. They just quietly cleaned their weapons, shared water, and prepared to go back when needed. In the command center, Captain Hana was coordinating supply distribution. She had been awake for the entire 12 hours, managing logistics while her soldiers fought. Your people surprised me today, Captain. Hana looked up from her displays. Did we? I expected you to last 2 hours. Maybe 3. We're stubborn, Commander. It's a species trait. Stubbornness isn't enough against the Drakon. They'll keep coming. This battle could last days, then we'll fight for days. Velthar studied her face. She wasn't being dramatic. She genuinely believed her people could maintain this pace. Captain, no offense intended, but the Kethrani are bred for war. We have physical advantages you lack. Even we cannot fight indefinitely. You're right, Commander. You have advantages we don't. You're stronger, faster, more durable. Hana pulled up a display showing casualty reports. But wars aren't won by who's strongest. They're won by who's still fighting when the other side stops. Over the next 6 hours, the battle continued. Velthar rotated his forces carefully, making sure everyone got rest. The Kethrani fought in 4-hour shifts. It was the maximum time a warrior could maintain peak efficiency. The humans fought in 6-hour shifts, then 8-hour shifts. Then they just stopped rotating entirely on some sections where the fighting was heaviest. They simply stayed and fought. At hour 24 of the siege, Velthar found Private Su Young sitting against a wall, eating a ration bar. She was young, maybe 22. Her entire squad had been killed 6 hours ago. He had seen it happen on the monitors. A Drakon breakthrough that her squad had stopped at the cost of their lives. Private, you should be in medical. She looked up at him with red eyes. She had been crying but had stopped. I'm not injured, Commander. You've experienced significant trauma. You should rest. Respectfully, sir, I need to keep moving. If I stop, I'll think. If I think, I'll break. So I'm going to keep fighting. She stood up, checked her rifle, and walked back toward the defensive line. Velthar watched her go. By all logic, she should be incapacitated by grief. By all military doctrine, she was a liability. But she was walking back into battle anyway. That night, as the first day of the siege ended, Velthar sat in the command center and stared at the casualty reports. The humans had lost 30% of their forces. The Kethrani had lost 15%. But the humans were still ready to fight. Something was wrong with his understanding. These creatures should have broken. They should have collapsed from exhaustion or fled from fear. Instead, they were maintaining their equipment and preparing for day 2. Velthar pulled up Earth's military history again. He read deeper this time, not about tactics or weapons, but about the soldiers themselves. He found records of battles where humans fought for days without sleep. Sieges where they held positions for months. Wars where they endured conditions that would have destroyed any species. Day 3 of the siege began with rain. Velthar stood on the command center balcony and watched water pour from the dark sky. The Drakon didn't care about weather. They attacked through the rain just as they had attacked through the night. He was exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. His muscles ached. His eyes burned. He had been rotating with his warriors, taking his turn on the walls, but command duties meant his rest periods were short and interrupted. The Kethrani were struggling. He could see it in their movements, hear it in their voices. They were still fighting well, but the constant pressure was wearing them down. 3 days of continuous combat with only brief rest periods between shifts. He checked the human positions on his display. They were still fighting. How? He couldn't understand it. The humans should have collapsed by now. Their physical limitations should have destroyed them. But every time he checked, they were there, holding their positions, fighting with the same grim determination they had shown on day one. Velthar decided he needed to see for himself. He found Lieutenant Dai Jung on the eastern wall. The young officer looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, his face was pale, and he moved like every muscle hurt. But his hands were steady on his rifle, and his voice was calm when he gave orders to his squad. Lieutenant, Dai Jung turned and saluted. The movement was slower than military standard, but he completed it. Commander, how are your people holding up? We're tired, sir. But we're functional. Functional. That was one word for it. Velthar looked at the other humans on this section of wall. They all looked like Dai Jung. Exhausted, hurting, but still moving, still fighting. The Confederation fleet is delayed, Velthar said. There was a Drakon ambush in the outer system. They're fighting their way through, but it will be at least 3 more days before they reach us. He watched Dai Jung's face carefully, looking for the break. For the moment when the human would realize they couldn't hold for 3 more days, Dai Jung just nodded. Then we hold for 3 more days, sir. Lieutenant, you've been fighting for 72 hours. Your species requires sleep. 8 hours per day according to your biology reports. We'll sleep when we're dead, Commander, or when we're relieved. Whichever comes first. It should have sounded like bravado, like false courage. But Dai Jung said it the same way he might say he needed to reload his rifle. Just a fact about the situation. A Drakon emerged from the rain. Dai Jung shot it without looking away from Velthar. The creature fell. 2 more took its place. Dai Jung shot them too. Excuse me, sir. I need to coordinate with the Western squad. We're running low on ammunition in Section 4. Velthar watched him walk away, moving through the rain and the chaos like he was walking through a normal day at the training base. Later that afternoon, Velthar found Sergeant Taewan in one of the supply depots. The human was sorting ammunition with his one good arm and his prosthetic. His movements were efficient despite his exhaustion. Sergeant, you should be resting. Taewan looked up. Rest is for the dead, Commander. Right now I'm still breathing, so I'm still working. That's not sustainable. It is until it isn't. Taewan picked up a box of ammunition. You want to know something funny, Commander? When I lost this arm, he gestured with his prosthetic, I thought my military career was over. Thought I was done. But then I realized something. Fighting isn't about having 2 arms or 4 arms. It's about refusing to quit. So here I am, 1 arm short, still in the fight. How did you lose it? Bad landing on a training exercise 3 years ago. Crushed it. Doctor said I was lucky to survive. And you stayed in the military? Why wouldn't I? This is what I do, Commander. It's who I am. He paused, looking at the wall where the fighting continued. You know what makes humans dangerous? We've spent thousands of years learning how to survive, how to keep going when everything says stop. Every war we fought, every disaster we survived, it taught us something. It taught us that the only real failure is giving up. Velthar left the depot more confused than when he entered. That evening, Colonel Jamin invited him to share a meal. The human colonel was older, probably in his late 50s, with gray hair and steady hands. They sat in a small room away from the main command center, eating simple rations. Your warriors are impressive, Commander, Jamin said. The Kethrani live up to their reputation. As do yours, Colonel. Though I must admit I did not expect this level of performance from your species. No, I imagine you didn't. Jamin took a bite of his ration bar. Tell me, Commander, what's the longest war your species ever fought? 8 months, against the Vrex Collective. And that was considered long? It was exhausting. We lost many warriors. It tested our entire society. Jamin nodded slowly. On Earth, we had a war that lasted 30 years. Another that lasted 100 years, on and off. We had a war where soldiers fought in trenches for 4 years, barely moving a few miles in either direction. Men lived in mud and blood and kept fighting. That sounds like poor tactics. Maybe. Or maybe it was just reality. War isn't always clean, Commander. Sometimes it's just about who can endure the longest, Baron. But why? Velthar leaned forward. Why would anyone continue fighting in those conditions? Why not surrender? Why not retreat? Because that's not how we're built. Jamin pulled up a display on his tablet. It showed human biology. Look at this, Commander. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We couldn't run as fast as our prey. We couldn't kill them with strength or claws. So we just followed them, for hours, for days, until they collapsed from exhaustion. We're built to just keep going. That's hunting. This is war. War is just hunting with different targets. Jamie closed the display. Every human here knows how to be tired. We know how to be scared. We know how to hurt. We've lived with those feelings our whole lives, so when battle comes, it's not new to us. It's just another day of pushing through. That night, the Drakon launched their largest assault yet. Thousands of them hit the walls simultaneously. Belthar called every available fighter to the defenses. For 6 hours, it was chaos. Pure desperate fighting. The Drakon broke through in 3 places. Each time, mixed units of Kethrani and humans pushed them back. The defenders paid for every inch in blood. Belthar fought alongside his warriors. He fired until his rifles overheated. He struck with all 4 arms until his shoulders burned. And slowly, gradually, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt like giving up. Just for a moment. Just a flash of thought. What if they just retreated to the inner bunkers? What if they called for evacuation? The Confederation would understand. They had fought well. No one could ask for more. The thought horrified him. A Kethrani warrior did not think such things, but his body was betraying him. His species simply wasn't designed for this kind of prolonged combat. He looked to his left and saw Private Su Young, the young human who had lost her entire squad. She was fighting with mechanical precision, her face blank, not numb but focused, like she had gone to some place inside herself, where pain and fear couldn't reach. He looked to his right and saw Ensign Minji. The medic was treating a wounded Kethrani warrior while simultaneously firing her sidearm at approaching Drakon. She was doing both things with equal concentration. These humans should have broken days ago. They should be useless by now. But they just kept fighting. Captain Hana appeared beside him. She looked as exhausted as he felt, but her voice was steady. "Commander, we need you functional. Take 5 minutes, breathe, we'll hold." "Captain, I can't." "Yes, you can. Your warriors need you sharp, not broken." 5 minutes, Commander. That's an order from an ally." He wanted to refuse. His pride demanded it, but his body was screaming for rest. He nodded and stepped back from the wall. For 5 minutes, he just breathed. He drank water. He let his muscles recover. And he watched the humans fight. They weren't fighting with passion or glory. They weren't charging heroically or making dramatic last stands. They were just fighting. One shot at a time, one step at a time, moving forward because moving forward was the only option. When he returned to the wall, he felt something shift inside him. He stopped trying to fight like a Kethrani warrior showing dominance. He started fighting like a human, steady, methodical, sustainable. The assault finally broke just before dawn. The Drakon pulled back to regroup. The defenders had held. Belthar walked through the defenses, checking on his warriors. Many were sleeping where they stood, too exhausted to walk to the barracks. The humans were doing the same. No one had the energy for anything beyond basic survival. He found Lieutenant Daejung sitting with his squad. They were sharing water and quietly talking. When they saw Belthar approach, they tried to stand. He waved them down. "Stay seated. You've earned rest." "Thank you, sir." Belthar sat down with them. It was not proper for a commander to sit with junior officers. But nothing about this situation was proper. "Tell me honestly, Lieutenant, how much longer can your people maintain this pace?" Daejung looked at his squad. They all looked back at him. Some silent communication passed between them. "As long as we have to, Commander. That's not bravado. It's just how we're made. Humans have been surviving impossible situations since we lived in caves. This is just another impossible situation. We'll find a way. Even if finding a way means dying. Even then." Day 5 arrived with no dawn. Smoke from the continuous fighting blocked out the sun. The world had become a gray nightmare of constant combat, brief rest and then more combat. Belthar could barely remember what peace felt like. His warriors were breaking. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. They were making mistakes, missing shots they should have made. Moving slower, taking longer to respond to orders. These were signs he had read about in military history, but never expected to see in Kethrani troops. The humans were still fighting. They looked like walking corpses, but they were still fighting. Belthar had stopped trying to understand how. He simply accepted it as fact. Humans could endure beyond all logic or reason. That was just what they did. Then everything went wrong. The Drakon had been probing the defenses looking for weakness. They found it. A section of the southern wall where the defenders were thinnest. At 0300 hours, a suicide unit of Drakon warriors hit that point with everything they had. They broke through. The alarm sounded different this time. Not the steady warning of an external attack, but the sharp, desperate sound of an internal breach. Velthar ran toward the breach point, grabbing his weapons. He arrived to chaos. Drakon were pouring through a hole in the wall. The defenders were fighting desperately to contain them, but the creatures were spreading into the outpost interior. All units, fall back to secondary positions, Velthar shouted. Contain them! But the Drakon were too fast. They split into multiple groups, each heading deeper into the outpost. Velthar found himself cut off with a mixed group of 10 warriors. 4 Kethrani, 6 humans, including Lieutenant Dae-jung and Private Su-young. They were trapped in a storage corridor. Drakon were between them and the main defensive lines. We need to break through, Velthar said. Form up, we go together. They moved as a unit. Velthar led from the front, using his 4 arms to clear the way. The humans covered the flanks and rear. They fought their way through 2 groups of Drakon. Then they hit the main swarm. There were too many. Dozens of the creatures. Maybe hundreds in the corridor beyond. And more coming. Velthar fired until his weapons clicked empty. He drew his blade. Beside him, the humans did the same. They formed a circle back to back and prepared to make their final stand. This is how a warrior dies, Velthar thought. In battle, with honor. But then he felt something he had never felt before. Something that broke through his warrior conditioning and touched something deeper. He felt fear. Real crushing fear. Not the excitement of combat or the anticipation of victory. Just pure terror at the thought of dying in this dark corridor, far from home without completing his mission. He wanted to surrender. He wanted to run. He wanted anything except to stand here and fight anymore. His body was giving up. After 5 days of continuous combat, even his enhanced Kethrani physiology had reached its limit. He felt his arms shaking. His vision was narrowing. He was going to collapse. Then Captain Hana's voice came through his communicator. Commander, we're coming. Hold your position. 2 minutes, 2 minutes. An eternity in combat. Lieutenant Dae-jung stepped closer to him. Commander, I need you to breathe. Focus on breathing. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Do it with me. Lieutenant, I breathe, sir. That's an order from someone who's been exactly where you are right now. Velthar found himself following the human's instructions, breathing slowly. In and out. Good, Dae-jung said calmly, while simultaneously shooting a Drakon that got too close. You're experiencing combat fatigue. It happens to everyone. Your mind is telling you to shut down. Don't listen. Just focus on the next 5 seconds. Then the next 5 after that, I can't. Yes, you can, because the alternative is dying. And you're too stubborn to die today. I can see it in you, Commander. You're a survivor, just like us. Private Su-young moved to his other side. She had been quiet for days, functioning like a machine. Now she spoke softly. Sir, when my squad died, I wanted to give up. I wanted to just stop. But Sergeant Tae-wan told me something. He said the only way to honor the dead is to keep living. So I kept fighting. Not for glory. Not for victory. Just to keep living 1 more second. The other humans formed a tighter circle around him, protecting him, giving him space to recover. A human corporal named Young-soo grinned at him through the chaos. Welcome to humanity, Commander. We all break sometimes. The trick is breaking forward instead of backward. 2 minutes felt like 2 hours, but Hana's team arrived. They hit the Drakon from behind, breaking the swarm. The corridor cleared. Velthar stood there, his weapons hanging loose, his body shaking. He had almost given up. Him. A Kethrani warrior. He had almost surrendered to fear and exhaustion. Lieutenant Dae-jung put a hand on his shoulder. Come on, Commander. Let's get you to the medical bay. I don't need medical attention. I need to command. You need 5 minutes of rest, some water, and some food. Then you can command. This is not negotiable. They walked together through the damaged outpost. The breach had been contained, but it had cost them. More casualties. More damage. More supplies consumed. In the medical bay, Velthar sat while Ensign Minji checked him over. She worked quickly and efficiently, her hands steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. You're dehydrated and your muscles are severely fatigued, she said. I'm giving you an injection to help with the fatigue, but what you really need is sleep. 8 hours minimum. I can't sleep for 8 hours. The battle will be here when you wake up, sir, and you'll be more useful rested than dead. She administered the injection. There, that should help for a few hours. But Commander, you need to pace yourself. This isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. After she left, Dr. Hyunwoo entered. He was an older human, probably a scientist rather than a soldier. He carried a tablet. Commander Velthar, I'm Dr. Hyunwoo. I study biology. May I speak with you? If you must. I've been observing the battle. Specifically, I've been comparing Ketharani and human performance over extended combat periods. He pulled up graphs on his tablet. Your species is remarkable. Stronger, faster, more durable than humans. In a short engagement, a Ketharani warrior is worth 3 humans. But look at this graph. The graph showed performance over time. The Ketharani line started high but dropped steadily. The human line started lower but remained almost flat. Your species is designed for overwhelming force, Hyunwoo explained. You're ambush predators, essentially. Strike hard, strike fast, win quickly. Humans evolved differently. We're persistence hunters. We can't run fast, but we can run forever. We can't hit hard, but we can hit constantly. I experienced this personally today, Velthar said quietly. Yes, your body reached its breaking point. That's normal. Every species has limits, Hyunwoo sat down. But humans have learned something over millions of years of evolution. We've learned that the breaking point isn't the end. It's just a wall you have to push through. On the other side is a kind of functioning that isn't peak performance, but it's sustainable. How do you push through?
Honestly?
Most of us don't know how we do it, we just do. When our bodies say stop, we find a way to take one more step, then another, then another. Eventually, those steps add up to miles. Velthar thought about Private Su Young still fighting after losing her entire squad. About Sergeant Tae-Wan with his prosthetic arm. About Lieutenant Dae-jung, who had been awake for days but still had the clarity to help Velthar through his crisis. Your species is insane. Hyunwoo laughed. Maybe, but we're alive. And in the end, that's what matters. That night, Young-soo found Velthar on one of the observation decks. The human soldier was younger than most, maybe mid-20s. He had a bandage on his head and his left arm in a sling. Mind if I sit, Commander? Go ahead. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the distant fires where the Drakon were regrouping. Thank you for earlier, Velthar said. When I was done struggling. No thanks needed, sir. We all struggle. That's the secret nobody tells you about war. Everyone breaks. The heroes are just the ones who break forward. You seem to understand this deeply. Young-soo shrugged. My grandfather fought in a war on Earth, lasted 3 years. He told me once that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. He said the bravest thing he ever did was just waking up every day and choosing to keep going. Is he still alive? Yeah, he's 78 now. Lives by the ocean. Still wakes up every day and chooses to keep going. Young-soo smiled. That's what humans do, Commander. We wake up and keep going. Not because we're strong, but because giving up isn't in our nature. A Drakon probe attack started on the eastern wall. Young-soo stood up wincing as his wounded arm shifted. Duty calls, he said. You coming, Commander? Velthar stood. His body still ached. His mind was still exhausted. But he had learned something today. The breaking point wasn't the end. It was just another obstacle to push through. Yes, he said. I'm coming. They walked together toward the fighting. A Ketharani warrior and a human soldier. Not so different after all. That night, fighting alongside the humans, Velthar discovered something about himself. He was stronger than he thought. Not because his body was enhanced or because his species was bred for war, but because he had learned the human way. The way of endurance. The way of refusing to quit. The Drakon attacked again and again. Day 7 began differently. The Drakon attacks had slowed during the night. Not stopped, but definitely reduced. The defenders used the breathing room to rest, resupply, and tend to their wounded. Nobody spoke about hope. They were too tired for hope. But there was something else in the air. A quiet understanding that they had survived the worst. Velthar stood in the command center watching the sensor displays. The Confederation fleet was 12 hours away. 12 hours. After 7 days of hell, they just needed to hold for 12 more hours. Captain Hana entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Velthar. He had learned to drink the human beverage over the past few days. It was bitter and strange, but it helped him stay alert. "Fleet's almost here," she said. "Yes. We're going to make it." Belthar looked at her. She had been awake for most of the past 7 days. She looked like she had aged 10 years, but her eyes were clear and her voice was steady. "You never doubted, did you?" "Oh, I doubted plenty, Commander. Every single day, every single hour." She took a sip of her coffee. "But doubt doesn't matter. Action matters. So I kept acting like we would win, and eventually it became true." The morning passed quietly. The Drakon made several small probing attacks, but nothing like the massive assaults of previous days. It seemed they were finally running out of warriors. The defenders had killed thousands of them. The bodies piled so high in some places that they created obstacles. At noon, the Confederation fleet arrived. Belthar watched on the sensors as the massive warships dropped into orbit. Dropships began launching immediately. Fresh troops, fresh supplies, relief. Within 2 hours, the Drakon were in full retreat. The capital ships that had brought them began jumping away. The ground forces tried to disengage, but the fresh Confederation troops pursued them mercilessly. By evening, it was over. The siege of Outpost Meridian had lasted 7 days. The defenders had held against overwhelming odds. They had survived. Belthar walked through the outpost as the relief forces took over defensive positions. He saw his Kethrani warriors being helped to medical bays. Many were unconscious from exhaustion. Others were barely standing. They had fought with honor and courage, but the extended battle had broken them. He found the human forces gathered in what used to be a supply warehouse. They were exhausted, wounded, and many were in worse physical condition than the Kethrani. But they were standing. Some were even helping to unload supplies from the relief ships. Lieutenant De Jung saw him and straightened, attempting a salute. Belthar stopped him. "No salutes, Lieutenant. You've earned rest. Rest can wait, sir. There's work to do. The relief forces will handle it. With respect, Commander, they don't know the outpost layout like we do. We can help." Belthar looked at the other humans. They were nodding in agreement. They had just survived 7 days of continuous combat, and they wanted to keep working. "You're all insane," he said, but there was affection in his voice. Dejung grinned. "Yes, sir. That's been established." That evening, Belthar found Ensign Minji in the medical bay. She had finally stopped treating patients and collapsed into a chair. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. "Ensign," she looked up, then tried to stand. He waved her down. "Stay seated. I wanted to thank you. You saved dozens of lives during this siege, including mine, I think." "Just doing my job, Commander. Your job was to provide medical support. You did much more than that. You gave everyone around you the strength to continue." He paused. "How did you do it? How did you run into enemy fire over and over without breaking?" Minji was quiet for a moment. "My mother was a nurse. She worked in a hospital in one of Earth's poorest regions. I remember asking her once how she dealt with all the death and suffering. She told me that every life you save makes all the pain worthwhile. So I just focused on the next patient. Then the next. Then the next. I didn't think about the big picture. Just the next person who needed help. One step at a time. Yes, sir. It's the only way to survive the impossible. Break it down into possible pieces." Belthar found Sergeant Taewan helping to organize supply distribution. The human was moving boxes with his one good arm and his prosthetic refusing to rest. "Sergeant, you should be sleeping." "I'll sleep tonight, Commander. Right now, people need food and ammunition. This is more important. You fought for 7 days straight." "So did you, sir." Belthar had no response to that. He picked up a box and started helping. They worked in silence for a while. "Sergeant, I need to apologize to you." "For what, sir?" "When I arrived here 2 weeks ago, I dismissed your species. I thought you were weak. I thought you would break in your first real battle." Taewan smiled slightly. "You weren't completely wrong, Commander. We are weak. Physically, we're one of the most fragile species in the galaxy. We break easily. We die easily. We're not built for war like your people are. But you survived." "No, sir. We didn't just survive, we won. Because humans learned a long time ago that strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward." He hefted another box. "Every human here has been broken at some point in their life. We've all failed, fallen, lost things we loved. And every time we had a choice, stay down or get back up. We all chose to get back up. That's what makes us dangerous," Private Su Young approached them. She looked different than she had during the battle. The blank mechanical expression was gone. She looked tired and sad but human again. "Commander Velthar, can I speak with you?" "Of course, Private." They walked to a quiet corner of the outpost. The sun was setting, painting the damaged walls in orange light. "I wanted to thank you, sir. During the battle, when everything was chaos, you were there, steady, it helped." "I nearly gave up, Private. You and the others had to help me through it." "That's the point, sir. We all nearly give up, but we help each other through it. That's what makes us strong. Not individual power, but collective endurance." Velthar looked at this young woman who had lost her entire squad but continued fighting. "What will you do now, Private?" "I'll remember them, my squad. I'll carry their memory and keep fighting. For them, for everyone who didn't make it." She paused. "And I'll help the next person who's about to give up. Because someone helped me when I needed it." That night, Velthar sat with Captain Hanna and Colonel Jamin in the command center. The relief commander had taken over operations, giving them time to rest. But none of them wanted to sleep yet. They were too wired, too full of the strange energy that comes after surviving something terrible. "Your official report will be interesting." "Commander?" Jamin said. "Yes." Velthar pulled up his original evaluation on a display. "I wrote that humans were acceptable but unremarkable. That you lacked the physical tools for true warfare. And now?" Hanna asked. "Now I know I was measuring the wrong things. I was measuring strength and speed and durability. I should have been measuring something else entirely." "What's that?" "The capacity to suffer and keep functioning. The ability to face impossible odds and refuse to quit. The strength to help others when you yourself are broken." Velthar deleted his original report. "I need to write something completely different." He spent the next hour writing. When he finished, he read it aloud to them. "Human military forces represent a paradigm shift in our understanding of warfare. While they lack the physical advantages of warrior species like the Ketharani, they possess something far more valuable: the absolute refusal to surrender. In 7 days of continuous combat against the Drakon, human forces sustained 70% casualties but never broke formation, never retreated without orders, and maintained operational effectiveness throughout. Where other species have limits, humans have a line they simply will not cross: the line of surrender. They do not fight to win quickly. They fight to outlast their enemies. And in the grinding reality of modern warfare, endurance matters more than strength." Recommendation: accept humans as full military partners with particular emphasis on their capabilities in sustained defensive operations and long-term campaigns. Further recommendation: all Confederation forces should train alongside human units to learn their methods of endurance and psychological resilience. Hanna smiled. "That's quite a change from your first assessment." "I was wrong. Completely fundamentally wrong. I judged you by Kethrani standards. That was my mistake." "No shame in that, Commander," Jamin said. "Every species judges others by their own standards. It takes wisdom to recognize when those standards don't apply." The next morning, Velthar prepared to leave. His transport was waiting. But before he left, he walked through the outpost one final time. He found Lieutenant Dae Jung on the eastern wall, looking out at the battlefield. The young officer had finally gotten some sleep and looked almost human again. "Lieutenant, I'm departing today." "Safe travels, Commander. I wanted to tell you something. When we first met, you asked me to teach you Kethrani combat techniques. I refused. I told you that you lacked the physical tools for true warfare. I remember. I was wrong. Not about the techniques. Those truly do require different physiology. But about warfare. I thought I knew war because I had fought in 43 campaigns. But I had never fought a war. I had fought battles. You humans know war, real war. The kind that lasts for days, weeks, months. The kind that tests not your strength, but your soul.